Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Tom Stewart here. I am with Matt Ricketts and my good friend Kevin Kunkel. This is Smart Business Moves. Wednesday, August 18th. Wow, we're past the halfway mark in the month of August. How's everybody doing today?
It's a good day, man. Good day.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Liz wanted me to give everybody her apologies for not being here today. I don't even know if apologies are necessary. Hey, Denise, how are you today? She was traveling and she was on her way to Dallas yesterday, and they ran into some weather, wound up spending a night in Kansas City that she didn't plan to, and eventually made her way to Dallas sometime this morning, but too many moving parts. So we're going to hold down the fort without Liz today, but it's going to be good because Kevin has some good information you guys are all going to benefit from. I've worked with Kevin for a long period of time, and he's going to be able to give us some information that's going to be useful regarding, building your organization. He does workforce development. He'll explain what that's about. He works with a lot of Department of Labor agencies. He knows where some money is out there that we might be able to get to assist ourselves with building our workforce. And he's got a pretty interesting career background, and he'll have a story or two to share with us. I'm sure that will be good. Before we jump into all of that, though, I just want to take a minute and say that we've been watching the COVID numbers kind of tick up, and I guess it's not really getting as better as thought as it's not getting better as quickly as we thought it would. It's not getting better at all right now, is it, Matt?
No, I had a kind of anecdotally, there's a county that's adjacent to where I'm at, Jefferson County. We do serve part of it, and definitely not a county that I would have thought would do this, but they went to an all mask mandate in the schools this week. They started off without masks the last 2 weeks. There's just hundreds and hundreds of cases through K through 12. It's a pretty big district, and they were mask free all through COVID last year and kind of got through, maybe a case here, a case there. But this seems to be a little different now. No serious cases that I'm aware of as of yet. But that's going on right now. But on the flip side, my daughter's been in school for 2 weeks at a private girls' high school, and the vaccination rate's about 90 to 95% at that school. Between the educators and the students, and there is some mandatory testing, but they've had 0 cases. So there are some models of both things that are happening out there that I'm kind of aware of from my own experience, and then from what's in the news here locally. But the county, Jefferson County, going to masks was surprising because we have a statewide no mask rule that's kind of come down from the governor, and so it was surprising for them to go against that.
Yeah, same thing here in South Carolina. The legislature passed a law prohibiting school districts to make masks mandatory. The schools in my particular area, though, the school district said that we were going to mandate masks anyway. So they did. All these announcements went out yesterday. Today was the first day of school. So supposedly they're mandating mask wearing, but I understand from talking to kids who went to school today that it really isn't being enforced. So I don't know what that's about, but this is just an interesting data point I'll share. Then we'll move on. This is from a school district in the western part of the state of South Carolina, and they're doing virtual learning. And they started off, this would have been their first week in school as well. And the reason they're doing virtual learning is a year ago at this time, they had 3 students under quarantine. So this would have been August of 2020. COVID was still very much a thing. And nobody was really testing positive at that time out of their student population. This same time this year, they get 634 students under quarantine, and 142 of them tested positive. So I guess the thing that they're
163 positive, 142 have been able to return.
Oh, thank you. So I guess the thing that's different is the Delta variant is more contagious for kids than what it was a year ago. So all these numbers we've been looking at about we think COVID's going to start burning through and getting better here in a while. Well, the thing that some people are starting to speculate is maybe we didn't factor in sending kids back to school, and that might be a complication that could drag this thing out longer than what it would be otherwise. Not to say that sending kids back to school is not a good thing. They need to go back to school. I just don't know what that's going to mean to all the staffing challenges that we're having. Because I know I've been seeing it in my business, and I know other people have as well, where they've had people out because they've either been exposed or sick themselves, and even people have been vaccinated or testing positive. And if you layer over that, if they wind up doing more of this in-home learning, it's just going to be more people that aren't going to be available in the workforce. And I think that recruiting now is more difficult than it was a month ago.
That's what I'm seeing. You can blame it on several factors, including, additional stimulus funds that, might make it easier for people to decide to go to a one-income family instead of a two-income family, or whatever the logic is. But yeah, I think that COVID still is playing a factor in keeping people from coming back to work. And sounds like, it's free babysitting to a lot of my employees during the school year. They're relying on it to be able to work from 8 to 4 on a given day. So yeah, that worries me if we have any more virtual learning, how that's going to play out.
Well, I'd like to bring Kevin into the discussion. Kevin has, I've worked with Kevin, we worked on projects over 20 years ago. Started out actually working with Kevin's brother, Cal, back in the 90s, mid-90s maybe. Castle Keepers was a contractor under the Welfare to Work program, which was like when Bill Clinton was president, right? Yeah. And Kevin's brother was working for, I guess, the local Department of Labor. I'm not sure what that formally was called, but basically he was responsible for administering that grant program, and we applied and we were selected. And actually, we were the largest contractor under Welfare to Work in the state of South Carolina, and made some pretty impressive accomplishments. Kind of stepped on some toes too, because we were the only for-profit contractor, and our motives, I guess, were to actually get people to work and generate revenue. And I guess we don't need to expand upon that too much, but it was an education, and I learned a lot, and we made a little bit of money at it too. And Kevin and I kind of worked on some projects together, and you guys helped me with some projects inside of Castle Keepers back in the 90s. We did a ISO 9000 project that you guys helped with, and helped us. We had a temporary labor agency. We still do, actually, called Service Staffing, but we were more serious about it in the 90s, and you guys helped us on that side as well. So that's enough of me. Kevin, could you maybe just share a little bit about your history and what some of your life experiences, and we'll go from there.
A bit about my history. So I'll try to synopsize this the best I can. So I guess if you back what brought me to Charleston, the Navy brought me to Charleston way back in 1980. I've been around these parts and rode nuclear submarines for a number of years, and did that deal. Kind of got turned on to sales because I did a stint of Navy recruiting, and I found that I like that interaction. And I left the Navy, and I answered a blind ad to, of all things, a garbage company. And that garbage company happened to be a Fortune 500 company known as BFI, Browning Ferris Industries. Some of you may recognize that. The brand is still out there in certain markets. So I had to work my way up. I became a sales rep, a commission sales rep, liked it, did well, became a sales supervisor, sales manager, became a district manager, pretty young, in my early 30s. And that's where the segue is to a philosophy that I still carry with me and I share with others. And I was introduced to a gentleman probably about a year and a half into my tenure as a DM in a boardroom in Atlanta, Georgia. And this guy walked in and he had a suit on and he had cowboy boots and a cowboy hat, about 6'2". His name was Ralph Stayer. He happened to be the CEO of Johnsonville Foods. Well, if you know that name, Johnsonville, that's sausage, bratwurst, breakfast sausage, all those things, tailgating, ball games, fun, right? So he introduced a philosophy that he had gone through in his business, and that is called Flight of the Buffalo. There's a book out there. And for those of you who are interested, that book came out probably around 90, 91. And as I once told the president of the University of Georgia, I gave him a copy and I said, this book's a bit dated. He said, that's what they say about the Bible. So I'll let you take that for whatever it's worth. But Flight of the Buffalo. So that analogy goes like this. Ralph one day had an epiphany and he was struggling with his company and didn't know where to go. People would come to him with every problem. They expected solutions, expected him to do it. He felt people didn't have the right attitude. They were mediocre. And he had this flight of geese. Well, if you pay any attention to a flight of geese, they fly in a V formation. And they do that so that they can take advantage of the aerodynamics. And, you know, they're getting all the resistance coming on that lead goose and everyone else that's going on top. But what geese do is they share the lead. So when that lead goose starts to get tired, he kind of falls back and the next goose takes the place. And so it goes until they reach their destination. When they land, they all land together. And, you know, you can see that. You ever see them go over, or you're in a place where they decide to come down. You kind of witness that. So in contrast, unlike the buffalo, hey, lead buffalo, right? Everybody's following that guy. And we all know what happened, right? They'd lead him in. The buffalo hunters would slaughter him. Lead buffalo would get killed. And all the other ones would stand around waiting for the lead buffalo to tell them what to do. He's gone. They don't know. So therein lies that analogy and the crux of Flight of the Buffalo. And underlying to that is learning to let employees lead. So transferring ownership. And how do we go about that? How does that occur? So, you know, for many of us at that time and even now, you know, we've been accustomed to a paradigm that is, we're the leader, we have to do the stuff. We have the answers. We have to have the answers. And so what I suggest to people is that, you know, you have to kind of pull back from that. And, you know, I want to kind of interject what I've heard throughout the month from, you know, the different folks who've been on, from Joe, from Alonzo, from Sarah, from Trisha, from who else do we have? Ken.
Ken
Gave some varying examples kind of how that ownership is taking place within their organizations. And what I want to share with them that really stuck out to me was Joe. And he mentioned, I probably have the terminology wrong, but he mentioned this gang of six or something like that, a gang of six or team of six people. And he had some issues in a certain area. And instead of him running with what he thought the answer was, he brought these folks together and they seemed to be kind of a trusted group that, you know, has wanted to engage. And he gave them an assignment of, let's find out how we can get to the crux of this, and let's look at some solutions. So they took that, and then they came back with what they felt were the solutions. So that does a number of things. If you can get to that point, with folks and developing that trust and getting people to have a willingness, and it really does take trust, and know that they're bought in. Because a lot of times people just think, I come here, I work, I go home, I don't care anything else about it. So it's about trying to gain that buy-in with people. Okay. Any comments or questions about that?
Yeah, you know what? I love this. So one of my feelings is sometimes I rely on that too much. I want to give them a vision and get the buy-in and things like that. And I rely on that a little too much to try and get people to see a future and things like that. Do you think you can kind of over leverage that as a kind of as a skill, or how do you leverage that and get buy-in from that? Because oftentimes people, they have their own pushback to this sort of thing. They don't want to, shift who they are to be part of your organization. Does that mean they're just not a fit, or does that mean you can move them along in some fashion?
So in my experiences, what I've found and in using this and using it way back at BFI and taking it to others is you almost have to sometimes use the life cereal analogy, if anybody remembers that. They've got little Mikey sitting there at the table, and if, Mikey likes it, hey, must be good, right?
Right.
So, usually you end up finding some champions, what I call champions, or maybe today the better term is influencers in your company, people who they do buy. And that sometimes is really the starting point, because the other part, of being that good leader is you have to be willing to develop your folks. And so sometimes if you just go out like Matt is saying, and I want to give them the vision and I want them to think strategically, and they're going, whoa, that's foreign to me, man. I do not know what he's talking about. I don't see what he sees. And I'm guilty of that, because I can look at the whiteboard and I'm like, man, do you see that picture? This is where we're going, and people are looking at me like, what? I don't know what he sees, but so yeah, you're right. So you really have to work on developing some of the folks to get there to understand that. And I think one of the things is in that whole philosophy, as you mentioned, Matt, is vision. And I think what you have to do with the whole organization is, this is an old cliche from, I think Tom reminded me the other day of Stephen Covey, but we have to always begin with the end in mind. And if we can see the end and take ourselves all the way back to the beginning, and now set the folks up to say, hey, here's where we want to go, and we want to do it. And here's what I need from you. And I really need your commitment, because you're going to help be a part of this and make it successful.
Yeah.
And then we set out with a weekly goal, and we set out with a monthly goal, and we set out with quarterly goals, and we put up scorecards so people can see where we're going. And, it's no different than a baseball game or a football game. Hey, here's where we're at. We really got to pick up the pace. It's the 8th inning, whatever the case might be. And in doing that, in my experiences, now, let me say this. This isn't something you just throw out there one time and, oh, hey, it's magic, it works. You have to, and I'm going to use the term nurture. You have to nurture the people, and you have to nurture the process.
Yeah, it sounds like a month. You have to keep working too. You have to keep practicing this yourself too, because doesn't sound like this comes natural.
This is something where you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, I'm going to set these expectations out for my organization, but I also have these expectations for me. And I have to have enough humility to step up and say, I didn't meet this. Okay, this is my bad. And the other part of it is, instead of being that leader who jumps in to have all the answers, Instead, be a leader who people can trust to come to you to be a resource. That's something Alonzo brought out. He used his DRIVE acronym. And as he introduced that, he said, I really want to be a resource to my people, you know? And, you know, that stuck with me because I thought, you know, that's something that holds true in this whole philosophy that, you know, that I'm imparting. I can give you a specific example. The first one that I ever did it with BFI, and we had our accounts receivable was in the gutter. It was terrible. And my accountant had been there. She was with the company that was acquisitioned, and she had two ladies, they're actually sisters who worked for her in receivables and payables. And Mary just didn't think that was ever going to change. That's the way it was, and we're not going to change that, and it's not worthwhile spending a lot of time. And I said, well, unfortunately, we're going to take a stab at this. I said, so let's get together and let's see if these two ladies can take a look. They're talking to these folks every day. What do they think? What would they change if we could let them do anything they could do to improve the process and get this better? You know, we're gonna help not only that, our cash flow, our revenue, everything. So we gave them that, and we came back in 30 days, and they had started implementation. I said, okay, I like what you're saying. I like what I see. Let's prototype this. And that's another thing I think is important is, you know, sometimes you can't be afraid to what I call prototype something, to try it out. See if that works. If it doesn't, tweak it, put it back.
Yeah.
We tweaked a little bit.
Tom, you always talk about, you know, there's, you know, what do you always say? It's a you can change direction quickly. How do you always say that? Like
reversible decisions.
Reversible decisions.
Don't be afraid to do something if you can, you know, roll it back. You know, if you don't get the outcomes, and you say, okay, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something different. You know, there's some decisions that aren't easily reversed. You know, if you try it and you've, you know, signed a 10-year lease on a property, and if it doesn't work, you're stuck with a 10-year lease. That's not easily reversible. But most decisions that we make in our business, we can just try it. If it doesn't work, the risk is low and it doesn't cost us much, and we can back up and do something different.
So I'll think about what he just said. You're talking about prototyping. It's a small experiment, and so that way you can unblock from these things that are like, oh, this does. I hear people say this, oh, that wouldn't work in my business, or this doesn't work. Listen to what Kevin just said. Run a prototype, run an experiment. You know, Tom and I had a discussion earlier today where we were talking about a kind of a bigger decision, and he was saying, you know, I tend to think a little, you know, to make these decisions slower. And I was like, you know, I was thinking to myself, like, that's not true. You're willing to make small experiments, but with big decisions, you're very thoughtful, insightful, and take your time and make those decisions carefully. So I think you have to weigh that. How much cost, or how much could this cost me, you know, to do this thing? But if it's small, you know, go big on the experiment. If it's can be something very, very expensive, try a smaller segment before you eat the whole elephant, right? Like, so I like this, Kevin. This is powerful stuff.
Yeah, you know, and in that example I gave, that was, you know, a small piece of the big picture. It was our accounts receivable. Yeah, it was impacting our whole business. And so we came out of that after 90 days. You know, before we looked like this. After that, at 120 days, we'd flipped that around. You know, we had now positive cash flow out of that. You know, no more, our write-offs were way down. So I rewarded them. I said, okay, I have these American Express checks. I'm going to hand each of these ladies this for their efforts, but we want to sustain this. So what can we do to sustain this? So, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but we gave them a percentage of whatever we no longer had to write off. Well, because it was a substantial amount, you know, that we were at. So that kept that going. But the more important thing is going back to the life cereal analogy. The other department heads and folks were going, wow, okay, I see. I kind of see what we're talking about here, what we need to do. So as I continue to put up more scorecards for, we have, roll off business like construction containers and front end loader commercial containers and residential. Folks had never seen before kind of how they're doing on a weekly basis or daily basis, who's doing good by driver. So we started, posting that. And, I can't not mention, talking about selling something. In those days, I was doing that stuff, on graph paper and printing things out. I did my performas in pencil on graph paper. And now I'm like, these people have MaidCentral. And it's like this magical tool. You have all this, you put all this stuff in there and all this stuff comes out. And, I get up in the morning, I tell Tom, I go into his castle quick, and I'm like, let's see who had a variance yesterday. And, it's like, wow, I can be so efficient. And so what I'm getting at is we have built-in scorecards today. And I guess it really depends, how effectively are you using that? But you can certainly use it if you're not. And I don't know if there's anybody out there who's not using that, but I'm going to tell you, if you don't have that, you really need to get that. That's a
objective data too, not just subjective, because we go by our feelings a lot with our employees about how they make us feel and how we feel about them. And we are often wrong, like when we go by our feelings. So you got to have like these objective scorecards. Because I ask people, I ask people that are coming on to MaidCentral, tell me who your best employee is. And after they've been on a couple of weeks, I'll go through the data and I'll be like, that's not your best employee. She makes you the happiest. She makes you feel good. She's not making you the most money. She's not getting the best scorecards. Your best employee is so-and-so. And they're like, whoa, I would have never known that. And it's because, you got to use these objective measures. I love this. This is all good stuff.
And when Matt says that, that's also an opportunity to coach people up. You see that, and there's some, we'll say a deficiency, but we're not going to look at it in the negative. We're going to look at it and say, hey, look, this person likes to be here. They have a great personality and a good attitude, but they may not even be aware that they're falling short here. So if we don't bring that to their attention, we're not only failing ourselves, we're failing them. And, that goes back to the whole part of developing people with this.
I made a note here, Kevin, and I have a class that we're going to build out of this, maybe a whole program, because having the numbers is part of the solution, but it's not sufficient. The other part of it is how you use the numbers and how you can use that feedback to motivate and lead in your team and get the outcomes that you're looking for. And that's a whole nother skill set. So you got to know what the numbers are, and you got to be able to interpret, and you got to know what they're telling you as the leader, but you're not actually doing the work every day. You got a whole team that's executing the playbook, if you will. So how do you use those numbers, those KPIs, to lead your team to get better outcomes?
Right. And I think, believe it or not, that, the folks really do want to see how they're doing, and getting that out there to them. It doesn't have to be where you create, fierce competition, but they like to know where they're at. Because I think at the end of the day, especially, and I know Matt has more, and people are striving to get to more of these solo teams, that people do want to be accountable. And when I say that, they do want to see, hey, how am I doing? They like to be in an environment where people are coming and saying, hey, what's up today? You need anything? Hey, boss, how am I performing? How am I doing? I used to get people to ask me that all the time because they wanted to know. They were hungry to get feedback. And again, I'm not going to say that 100% of the people are, but there are people out there who value that.
Yeah. I'll tell you just anecdotally when we switched to solos during COVID, what I was doing about once a month, and I'm not doing it as much now, I've handed off to my managers, was I would pull up the scorecard results for the month and I would call every technician we have and just say, hey, just want to let you know you're doing awesome. Your scorecard is this. Or even if they were a little bit below where I wanted, I would say, hey, everything's looking great. Just notice your scorecards are a little bit below where you normally are at. Anything you need from us. So it was kind of like, hey, you're doing great. And then, if they weren't doing great, it was more like, what can we do to help, basically? But yeah, I think that reaching out in this environment of a little bit of disconnect, a little bit less daily connection than we had before, and giving them that feedback. But it's built into the tools that we give our employees, but the human connection is still incredibly valuable, and that's tougher these days.
Yeah.
But in the absence of being able to have large group meetings, you can use technology. I know a lot of people are like using Slack and some other tools like that to, communicate, using, platforms that they can send text out. There's a lot of ways that you can create virtual communities, if you will, without everybody being in the same room together.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that all of this information, that we're sharing today, we now have we're in the 21st century, well into it. And we have all of this technology. And I think, by leveraging the technology to get this information we're talking about, into the hands of the folks, communicating with them, even though it may be a virtual communication or a text or whatever it might be, but we can, get those calls to action, if you will, to them, in front of them, instantaneously anymore. So, we shouldn't use, as an excuse that, we can't see them or something. I don't think so. But yeah, I think that, back to building, this philosophy in, the key to it is establishing your goal. And as a leader, make sure, like Matt's talking about, I'll take that opportunity, reviewing a scorecard with someone. And in reviewing that scorecard, keeping in mind, remember we talked about, what our goals are as an organization. So for you, the great performance I need from you is when you bring us a good scorecard, that means, this customer, we have a better chance of retaining that customer. When a price increase comes along, we have a better chance of keeping that customer. So that cleaning technician is doing their great performance just by just doing a good job for us. And we need to let them know that. I noticed too that the common thread, and while we're talking about this, through all of the other presenters this month, really did surround them. And the common theme that I seen was people. And while everyone talked a little bit about some numbers, it had a lot more to do with what they were doing with their people. And whether that was, incrementally incentivizing some things to reach goals. The lady Sarah seemed to be, more active with that. Trisha yesterday was talking about actually doing some therapy groups. Ken had talked about how do you maintain balance, right? So I think too, in your organization and as a leader, and really to be an effective leader, you have to, within your own integrity that you bring to the table, you have to let people know that you understand, or attempt to let them know you understand where they're at, maybe at any given point in time, because things do change, life's changes happen, and you just never know where somebody may be at. So I think it's a good idea too that you have to be keen, to staying tuned in with that. And I'm sure you all have your own ways of doing that, but if you don't do it, it's a good idea to really pick up on that. Because, and today we just talked about that before we came on. Hiring. Where do we find people? Well, we want to grow our business, yes. But what's one way we can kind of slow that pace of recruiting down? If we have good retention, right? If we have good employee retention, maybe we don't have to bring as many people in on that front end. So, that's a key. We already have a bird in the hand in our existing employees and our team members. Let's do what we can and burn the calories we can to take care of them.
In today's labor market, if you're not putting a big focus on retention and everything that happens from the minute that you make a job offer up through, the onboarding and the training, and once they're even, out in the field as a professional cleaning technician, we have to really pick our game up on the retention side because we can't afford turnover. It's hard. It's just too hard to replace people.
It's never been harder. And I think the model of 200% turnover is going to be very expensive and maybe non-sustainable, come this winter. You just may not be giving your kid Christmas presents if you're relying on, the way we've done business in the past.
This is going to force businesses, cleaning businesses, other businesses, but in the context of our audience, cleaning businesses to create better jobs and to be better employers, because if you're on the lower end of that scale, there's too many other jobs out there, and people are going to leave and they're going to go to the better jobs. And I know a lot of businesses are shutting their doors, maybe not permanently, but for a period of time. Some restaurants here in Charleston have closed up for the moment anyway, because they just don't have labor. And if you don't have people to work, you aren't able to provide your service.
Yeah.
This is unprecedented. This is unprecedented stuff. This has never happened before.
One of the things that I like to share with people when they're kind of coming to me for advice, or maybe they're a MaidCentral demo and they're just not maybe they're not quite ready for the software, is I always give them that bill rate calculator that you developed years ago, Tom. And they're telling me I just can't hire, and I'm first off I want to just go through that with them and see if their business is sustainable. I had somebody the other day that was like, well, we're paying $13 an hour, and that's the starting wage. I was like, okay, is that competitive in your area? She's like, well, XYZ company's paying 11. I'm like, all right, well, are they your competition anymore? Is your competition to hire another cleaning company? Or is it anyone that's hiring? Is it an possible opportunity that they're not taking? And I've run the numbers for myself, and to be competitive, I'm kind of getting to the point where I might raise my base wage to 17 or 18 by the end of this year. I'm not there yet mentally, but I'm getting pretty close to pulling the trigger on that number. I've run the analysis. I've basically reverse engineered what our break even point is on that for what I want to make for a personal salary, and it's all doable. It's just scary, even for me, because my average employee makes over $20.53. And I know it's to the penny. We average out at $20.53 per hour, but then you kind of create some wage compression when you lower the bottom up to 18.
Everybody has to go up accordingly. If not,
right,
you really aren't getting the benefit from it.
Right.
We set the minimum wage at $15 an hour in our business back in the middle of May, and we did rate increases across the board, and we made it very clear that we're not sure this is the last one of these you're going to see this year to our clients. And we're having the same discussions now that starting wage of 15 might not be good enough. We're competing against too much stuff. We're just competing.
NPR was, I was in the car, driving today. I don't leave my house a whole lot, so I was listening to NPR today for the first time in a while. and they were having a discussion on home health care on that field. And the average wage in that is $14 an hour. There are wait lists of like 2 years to get a home health care aide. So if you have an elderly parent that are like, that you might be worried about in a year, you might want to put them on a list now to get them some care. That's how bad labor is at the moment. Now it could shift. There may be some changes, but it's not going to be. That was like a wake up call to me, where I was like, because we compete for home health care aides is kind of like, that's kind of like one of the kind of people I try and poach for to come into the market.
Yeah.
So yeah, just that was like kind of eye opening to hear like 2-year wait lists.
Yeah, that's crazy. I had no idea, but just another data point that we have to pick our game up to be competitive.
Indeed. And as Matt brings that point up about the home health care aides, and I was sharing this in Charleston because it's something that I picked up on in the workforce development arena. I see people go through this training, and they go through training for CNA, certified nursing assistant, and try to get to PCT, but a lot of them would drop off and just remain CNA. Well, they'd end up, to get into shift work, and that CNA wage really doesn't get them to where they need to be. And so, I said it might be worthwhile to target, some of that audience out there, because we don't have, you don't have to work shift work coming to work for us. You work Monday through Friday, daytime. You're a single mom. You have an opportunity to get your child picked up or get them on the bus or whatever. And, there again, too, tapping into your local, workforce board, and to those folks out there, your workforce centers, whatever you call them in whatever state you're in, is a good idea, because there are varying resources out there where you might, and a lot of those people fit, the demographic may fit for people that you're looking for. So, like I was telling these guys before, you may be even able to get some subsidy with that, where they're paying some of the wage or some of the training. And when I brought the business services rep over to the Charleston site, I said, okay, tell them about, PHC, professional health, house cleaner certification. Wow. That fits all the wickets of what their program requires. So it's just checking it off.
So yeah, you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what you're doing for Tom's business. We talked about your philosophy a lot, but let's talk about the present day, what you're kind of doing now for Castle Keepers and for them now.
Well, I hope I don't share anything proprietary.
There's nothing proprietary here. It's just us having a discussion. Go ahead, Kevin.
I got you. So, I think, one of the things we've done with Tom and is to kind of come in and in some ways I validate for Tom maybe what he's been thinking, what he sees with his existing team. Where are they at? Here's my thought, something I brought to the table. I said, well, we can think of these things, but do we know them? And he says, what do you mean, do we know them? I said, well, have we ever assessed them? So I've spent a lot of time engaged in various assessments over the years. And so I said, let's take a look at something that perhaps can get us closer to understanding where these folks really are. And I think, Matt, you may have actually seen it with one of your folks.
You put one of mine through, and it was great. It kind of showed, that she had some personality traits, not just her skills, but her personality traits really fit the job that she was in. A lot of loyalty, a lot of things that were like, okay, cool. Like, these are things that I want to see when I'm hiring other people. So she's now the model for, like, if I'm evaluating people in the future and putting them through that test, I want to see very similar. Well, maybe not all as good as that, but I want to see similar traits.
Yeah. And I think, as I recall with that she was like, right on the line in many of those from being like very strong. And so, and she's had some experience and so forth, but Yeah, I think that that's what you want to use, and you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater using assessments either. You don't want to overuse them, but I think it gives you a little bit better guide when you're trying to make those decisions on, okay, I've been developing, for me, I'll see somebody and I'll see traits in people and I'll say, you know what, I think this person could do good in this. But then I have to pull myself back and say, okay, I need to kind of figure out and ask this person some questions about what's their background, what's their education, what's their experience, what have they shown me in what I've given them so far. So, using an assessment can help guide you. That's what I brought to Tom. And so we've asked those people, we've come to some conclusions because we want to establish that support center model, and we needed to determine whether we had someone in-house that was able to really fit that role or not. And we made the decision that we did not. So we are now in the process of, we've put an ad out, we put a posting out, we have a support center coordinator. I'm in the process of interviewing those people. I've got 3 more. I interviewed one yesterday, got the assessments to them. Interviewing 3 more tomorrow, 1 more Friday. Fairly decent response to the posting, and so we'll see where that goes. But we're putting we wrote a new job description for it. So
you're doing better than I was, because I did a couple of those interviews with Tom. So I'm glad, better you than me.
Well,
I was not having as much fun as it.
Well, so far I've done the initial 15-20 minute let's get to know one another, and I administer the assessment and get the results, and then we'll round back to who we want to bring back for another review. So we'll see how that shakes out, because we'll have to reach some consensus at that point. But I think that's going in the.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I think that's moving in the right direction. It's taken off a little more slowly, I think, than what maybe Tom wanted to see it go, but it's going now. And in terms of his day to day, we've looked at some different things. I think modifying a few. Just the way we're going to interact with the team, and how we're going to set some goals, and how we're going to get the scheduling game really up to par where it needs to be, which we're hoping that this support center coordinator can play a big role in that, because I'm partial to sales, and I'm looking in his dashboard and all that, and I'm going, man, there's room. We should be getting people. We need to do one. I look back to my similarities in the waste business, and we had what we call temp business, temporary business, construction business. Well, I'm fine with that to a certain degree. I correlate that to y'all's one-time cleans, Right. And I'm like, I see all these one-time cleans, and I'm like, why are we doing these one-time cleans? Why aren't we selling recurring business? Recurring business is where it's at. And, I don't know if we're not taking the opportunity to get there. So that's something we're looking at as well. And hopefully the support center person will be able to come in and, kind of take control of that.
So top down, what about addressing some of the other labor shortages? So you're using some of the, the government relationships you have through the labor boards and things like that?
We are doing that. We have changed up. We've taken down all of the old ads that were out there. There seemed to be a number of old ads that had accumulated. So Troy's taken all of those old ads down. I've helped them craft a new ad, and we've really surrounded that new ad with more of a employee value proposition surrounded by our core values. And Michonne has crafted a video. It's got some nice music. It's got a mom with her child getting off the bus, flexible schedule, takes you and shows you some of our cleaning technicians out in action. It's about a 20-second deal, boom. Because we want to get out too and use the Instagram and Twitter platforms. Also, I've looked, there seems to be, you can get a little traction with it. I don't know how much, but we're not on it. So we want to get on that as well, other than just Indeed. So we're using those avenues. The other thing, you can all look at within the workforce development when you get in touch with those folks is they'll do job fairs, and they'll do virtual job fairs. And, they'll attract a good amount of folks coming into that. There's a good amount of traffic depending on the market you're in. There's no cost for that. They'll set everything up. So that's another avenue, to look for labor.
So just so everyone's 100% on the same page with what Kevin's talking about is every state through a federal program has a workforce development agency. It has maybe a different name than that locally or something like that. But with that program, they're helping companies match up to employees, and oftentimes there may be even where Kevin mentioned the PhD program. If you can give these people some skills and some lifetime skills that they can apply to other jobs in the future, not just shirts, they may pay a portion of their wage for some period of time, up to 60% for, what do you say, 90 days, Kevin? Is that right?
Yeah, it just depends on the area, but most of them are 60 to 90 days. Yeah.
60 to 90 days.
So when you break it down, when you look at the current labor situation, and I don't know a company out there that's not looking for help, that they aren't supply constrained, it behooves all of us to reach out to, the local, agency that represents, the employment, division within your state. They've got people on the payroll that will talk to you, oftentimes come out and meet with you. They've got grant programs, and it's their job to spend that money. So if you've got jobs that qualify for that, they'll help you with like OJT and some of the other programs to offset some of the onboarding and training, costs.
OJT on the job training, guys, on the job training.
It's a free resource. Yeah. It's a free resource. We make jokes about, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. And, a lot of times that's not true, but this is an example. This is an example where it is true.
Yeah. Mostly, right? That's that.
And I'll just throw out there that if anybody runs into any snags wherever you're at, you can reach out to me, because most of the time I can get in touch with somebody in the know to help pave that road for you. Okay? So don't be afraid to reach out. And if you meet resistance, let me know. We'll see if we can help you out.
I am dropping Kevin's email in chat, and Kevin gave me permission to drop his personal mobile phone number in chat as well, and I just did. He cautioned, just text him though. He never answers his phone, but you can send him a text.
When you were saying that earlier that you only do text, I was laughing because I actually love it when I get a random number on and I pick it up. I'm just hoping for something exciting to happen when that call happens. Like if it's some scammer, if I can waste their time for a minute or two. But it's probably not the most productive thing that I do.
Well, we've got a couple minutes left. I'll share again the link to Flight of the Buffalo, which is the Johnsonville sausage story. I love their bratwurst.
Yeah. And
good show, Kevin.
I do want to leave you with something I heard a couple weeks ago, and this isn't mine, but I think it's pretty powerful, and it goes along the lines with what we've talked about today, with what everyone's talked about so far this month in all of your leadership presentations, and it's pretty simple, and it goes like this. It goes, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Okay, so let's not be reacting. Let's be thinking ahead. Let's be anticipative thinkers, and let's transfer that information and knowledge down to our team. So I appreciate y'all having me on. I enjoyed it, and if I can do anything for all of you, I'm happy to do that.
Kevin, thank you, man. This is good information. Especially appreciate having somebody to join us from, outside of the industry. This is some unique information. We've talked about some things here today that we really haven't touched upon in Smart Business Moves in the last year and a half or so.
And this is my if you really want to know, it's a Dove chocolate message inside, so you never know how someone's feeling or doing on a given day, so drop a little Dove candy in their hand and make a better day for them.
I've seen Kevin do that. When he comes by the office and he sees people, he'll give them a piece of candy, and I think I know there's a psychological benefit to that. You're building trust, you're building some loyalty, and all of those are characteristics. You're showing you care. We didn't get into all of that, but all of that ties into empowerment and getting people to engage and be self-directed leaders in the organization. Matt, any last thoughts?
Indeed,
here?
it does.
This is one of my favorite shows I've done in a long time, man. Kevin, we have a lot of great guests, but I learned a lot today. I appreciate it.
And Kevin, let's make a promise to ourselves. This won't be the last time you'll be helping us out with Smart Business Moves.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. So it is top of the hour. It is Wednesday. We are done for the week. We'll be back Monday, 5:00 Eastern. Another Smart Business Moves. You guys take care. Have a good weekend. We'll see you Monday. Bye-bye.